I want to talk a little bit about looking the part. When you show up to a production, you need to look like you know what you're doing. And it might seem like the most obvious thing, but I'm sure you've worked with these people because I have as well. There are some people who just don't understand that how you present yourself really, really matters. First impressions are everything, and if you're not making a good first impression, you can actually be hurting the final product because there's a funny thing that people do when they have a bad first impression, they typically will always look on the end product, the final video or short film or documentary or commercial, in a negative light because they're tainted by that very first impression. And it's really weird, but I've experienced it multiple times through different avenues of clients because, they get a bad taste in their mouth from someone showing up late or someone not being prepared or something like that. And even if the final video is excellent and like the best it can be and exactly what they wanted, if the shoot didn't go well and that first initial impression didn't go well, they really have a hard time being enthusiastic and happy with that final product. So I want you guys to keep these three things in mind for any kind of production, regardless of what it is. The first thing you need to pay attention to is how you dress and how you do your hair, and if you've trimmed your beard, if you have one, if you've groomed your mustache, what shoes you're wearing, what outfit you're wearing, how you smell, did you brush your teeth? Like all of those just initial, when you walk up to somebody and the very first visual thing that strikes you, is it a good thing? Is it how you want to present? And oftentimes you have to take into consideration the type of client it is or who you're meeting. Some people are much more old school, very like business minded, and they expect, really nice button downs and slacks and dress shoes and all that. And other people who are more familiar with, kind of run and gun productions can understand that you want to be a little bit more comfortable. And so they're fine with, jeans or shorts or whatever. But you always have to keep that in mind. How do you think they want you to look? Because it matters, it's that kind of like social mimicking. You're mirroring them. If they're, suited up businessmen, you might want to tailor a little bit more towards that direction. Now, that doesn't mean you have to totally change yourself and change your personality and change the aesthetics about yourself, but you should make sure that it's aligned. Don't show up in like a dirty t-shirt and gym shorts if you're going to like a high-end corporate office. It's just not a good idea, and you're probably not going to make a good first impression. The other thing that you need to keep in mind, the second thing, is you really need to keep in mind the gear that you have. A lot of clients don't understand the gear and the behind the scenes, but some do. And some might make very specific requests. So, when you show up with a DSLR with like a kit lens, and the person you're meeting, they're like, oh, I own that camera. I have that camera at home. It makes this impression with them that like you don't have anything special. You're not bringing anything extra to the table. So, for some shoots that might make sense where it's somebody who maybe it's a free gig or a low paying thing and they're, you're helping them out to kind of build a relationship, and they're just grateful that you're even there. So you probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time or worry about the gear that you have. But other times you might make sense to rent something or buy that thing that you've been looking at for quite some time just for that shoot, to have it and to have it for future shoots, but also to make that impression. I've worked with people where if you have a Red camera, they're just like, they think it's like the greatest thing. Even though that a Red camera isn't always necessary for every production, they think it is. They think if you've got a Red camera, you're cool and you know what you're doing. So there have been times where that's been the case, or other times where, oh, if you have an Alexa, if you have an Alexa, you must be a professional. Most people, if they're actually professionals, they can shoot on a variety of different cameras, and it really doesn't matter because it's more about the lighting, set design, wardrobe, makeup, all those other things that go into a production. But for whatever reason, some clients, some people get caught up in their mind about the gear. So just keep that in mind. Like what lenses are you using? What kind of lights are you bringing? What kind of microphones are you using? All of those things matter, and you want to make that good impression with the gear. And the final thing that you need to keep in consideration when you're doing any kind of production is just how you talk, how you act, how are you behaving on set when you're doing the shoot. Are you kind of standoffish and hesitant? Are you like maybe presenting yourself as unsure? That's one of the things that is really hard for even me myself. It was really hard for me to push myself into looking like I always knew what I was doing, because as many of you know, oftentimes you get in a situation where you're not sure how to handle it. You don't know. It's a foreign environment. There's some problem with the setup and you're not quite sure how you're going to tackle it. Maybe you don't have the right gear, or it's something totally unexpected and you're sitting there like, oh man, what am I going to do? But keeping that internal and not showing that and making the client or the other people around you feel like you don't know what you're doing, that's really important. It's okay to not have all the answers, but you still have to present yourself as someone who 99% of the time you do have the answers, you do know what you're doing. And it almost comes off sometimes, I think people, especially video people, can feel like they need to hold back, to be humble, or to not come across as arrogant. But sometimes they take that too far and they become too unsure. Oh, I don't really know what we should do with the lighting. What do you guys think? That kind of stuff. Or, oh, I don't know. Maybe we put the cameras over here. And they're like asking the client what the client wants. And sometimes the client knows. And if you have a client like that, yeah, just do what they say if they're giving you that direction. But other times you need to make those decisions on the fly, on the spot, and commit to the decision. And whether you're sure or unsure, if you commit and you believe in what you're doing because you know what you're doing, that sometimes is really helpful. And then just, being nice, being friendly, being genuine with the people around you. No one likes to be around a jerk or somebody who is just really aggressive, barking orders. So all those things just in how you're carrying yourself are so important. So just keep that all in mind. I know most people do it anyway, but I think for some of the people first getting into photo or video or these kind of, anything creative, it's ultimately subjective. And I think there are people who have really strong personalities and they kind of steamroll, and other people don't necessarily want to be that way. But other times you need to push yourself a little bit harder and know what you're doing and go in there and say, this is what we're doing. Here's why I want to do it. Okay, do you guys have any suggestions for me and how we can fine tune this? But definitely going in dressed appropriately, having the right gear, and acting like you know what you're doing are going to get you really far. And ultimately, that end product, that final video, when the client or the other people on the project have that confidence up front in you, it carries over to the final video or to the final film, whatever it is, carries over, and they'll look at that. And if it turns out really good, they're going to feel really good about it.